To understand why you struggle to find love, we must first dismantle the assumption that your single status is merely a result of external circumstances or statistical misfortune. While it is comforting to believe that you simply haven't met the right person or that modern dating culture is inherently flawed, these explanations often serve as convenient distractions from a more complex internal reality. The struggle to find and maintain a romantic connection is rarely about the availability of partners. It is about the availability of the self. For a specific subset of the population, those who are introspective, hyper-independent, and analytically minded, the barrier to love is not logistical. It is physiological. You are likely operating under a psychological architecture that has been designed quite efficiently to reject the very intimacy you consciously desire. This rejection is not a choice, it is a reflex. It is a systemic response where your nervous system perceives the proximity of another human being not as a source of comfort, but as a threat to your equilibrium. We must begin by analyzing the concept of safety within your neural pathways. For the securely attached individual, safety is defined by co-regulation. This means their nervous system calms down when they are in the presence of a trusted partner. Their cortisol levels drop, and their heart rate synchronizes. However, for the hyper-independent individual, safety has been coded differently. Your brain has learned to associate safety with autonomy. You have likely spent years, perhaps decades, constructing a life where you are the sole authority over your environment, your routine, and your emotional state. In this context, the presence of another person is not a soothing agent. It is a variable that introduces unpredictability. When a potential partner enters your life, your brain does not register companionship, it registers intrusion. The anxiety you feel when someone gets too close is not necessarily a sign that they are the wrong person. It is a sign that your biological imperative to maintain control is being challenged. This leads us to the phenomenon of hyper-independence as a trauma response. While society often praises self-reliance as a virtue, in the context of intimate relationships, extreme self-reliance is a defensive fortification. If you trace your developmental history, you may find that at some point you internalized a fundamental belief that relying on others is dangerous. This could stem from an environment where caregivers were inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, or intrusive. To survive this environment without experiencing constant disappointment, you adapted by suppressing your natural need for connection. You learned to meet your own needs, to soothe your own distress, and to solve your own problems. This adaptation was necessary for your survival at the time. However, as an adult seeking love, this same adaptation becomes your greatest liability. You have become so proficient at being alone that the act of needing someone feels like a regression. You view interdependence not as a healthy exchange of support, but as a weakness. Consequently, when a partner attempts to care for you or asks to rely on you, your instinct is to recoil. You perceive their needs as a burden and your own needs as a humiliation. The struggle is further compounded by deactivation strategies. This is a subconscious mechanism utilized by the avoidant attachment system to neutralize the threat of intimacy. When a relationship begins to deepen and the inevitable fear of engulfment arises, your mind seeks a way to re-establish distance without having to admit to the fear. To do this, it engages the intellect. You begin to hyper-focus on the flaws of the other person. You zoom in on minor details, their physical appearance, their vocal mannerisms, their choice of words, or their social habits. You amplify these imperfections until they become repulsive, effectively killing your attraction to them. This process is often mistaken for falling out of love or losing the spark. In reality, it is a manufactured repulsion. Your mind is creating a rational justification to exit the relationship so that you can return to the safety of your autonomy. You convince yourself that you are just picky or that you have high standards, when in fact, you are simply terrified of the vulnerability required to stay. We must also address the addiction to anxiety that many mistake for romantic chemistry. If you grew up in an environment where love was unpredictable or conditional, your nervous system learned to associate the stress of uncertainty with the feeling of attraction. You learned that love feels like a chase, like a question mark, like a high-stakes game where you must earn your place. Consequently, when you meet a secure partner, someone who is consistent, available, and transparent, your nervous system does not recognize this as love. It recognizes it as boredom. Because there is no adrenaline spike, no fear of abandonment, and no chaotic highs and lows, you perceive the connection as flat. You tell yourself there is no spark. You reject healthy, viable partners because they do not trigger the stress response that you have erroneously labeled as passion. You are caught in a cycle where you only desire people who cannot meet your needs because their unavailability feels familiar, while you dismiss those who could love you because their availability feels foreign and, paradoxically, unsafe. This creates a fantasy bond dynamic. The solitary mind often retreats into an idealized version of a relationship to avoid the friction of a real one. In the theater of your mind, you can construct a partner who is perfect. This imaginary partner understands you telepathically, places no demands on your time, and never acts in a way that annoys you. This fantasy serves a protective function. It allows you to feel the warmth of attachment without the risk of actual interaction. However, when you attempt to date a real human being, they will inevitably fail to measure up to this phantom ideal. Real people are inconsistent. They have moods. They have needs that conflict with yours. They are physically present in your space, creating noise and disorder. When you compare the messy reality of a human being to the pristine perfection of your fantasy, you feel a deep sense of disappointment. You interpret this disappointment as compatibility failure, rather than recognizing it as a refusal to accept the inherent friction of human existence. You use the ideal to devalue the real, ensuring that you remain alone and therefore safe. Furthermore, there is the issue of enmeshment fear. For the hyper-independent individual, there is a pervasive, irrational belief that a relationship is a zero-sum game regarding identity. You operate under the subconscious assumption that to be in a relationship, you must cease to be yourself. You fear that intimacy requires the total surrender of your routine, your preferences, and your private thoughts. You view a partner not as a collaborator, but as a colonizer who will slowly strip away your territories of selfhood. This fear causes you to monitor the relationship for signs of control. If a partner asks where you are, you feel interrogated. If they ask for more time, you feel suffocated. You defend your boundaries with disproportionate aggression because you believe you are fighting for your psychological survival. This defensiveness creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. Your rigidity makes your partner anxious, causing them to grasp tighter, which confirms your fear that they are trying to trap you, leading you to sever the connection entirely. Another critical component of this struggle is performance fatigue. Many individuals who struggle to find love hold a core belief that they are not lovable in their default state. You may believe that to be loved, you must perform a specific persona, the successful professional, the funny entertainer, or the calm intellectual. You do not believe that your unregulated, tired, or mundane self is worthy of affection. Therefore, the act of dating feels like a prolonged performance. Every interaction requires you to wear a mask to project an image of competence and desirability. This performance requires a massive expenditure of cognitive energy. After a period of dating, you become exhausted. You mistake this exhaustion for a lack of interest in the other person. You think, "I am tired of them," when in reality, you are tired of the effort it takes to be the version of yourself you think they want. You end the relationship to return to solitude, not because you prefer being alone, but because solitude is the only place where you are allowed to stop performing. We must also consider the role of alexithymia, or emotional disconnection, in this process. Years of suppressing your needs and relying solely on logic can lead to a disconnection from your own emotional signals. You may have difficulty identifying what you feel in real time. When a partner asks how you feel about them, you may draw a blank. You may feel a numbness or a vagueness where you expect to feel love. This emotional silence is often interpreted as a lack of care. You think, "If I loved them, I would feel it intensely right now." However, this numbness is often a protective dissociation. Your emotions are not absent, they are walled off. You have intellectualized your experience of life to such a degree that you cannot access the raw data of your heart. You analyze the relationship instead of feeling it. You look for logical reasons to stay or leave, ignoring the fact that love is not a logical equation to be solved, but an emotional experience to be inhabited. The struggle is also maintained by the sunk cost fallacy of isolation. You have invested so much time, energy, and identity into building a self-sufficient life that the idea of dismantling it for a relationship feels like a bad investment. You have optimized your environment for your own comfort. You have your routines, your habits, and your systems. A partner disrupts all of this. The adjustment period required to integrate another person feels like a degradation of your quality of life. You focus on what you are losing, the quiet mornings, the empty bed, the total control over the remote, and fail to value what you are gaining. You approach dating with a scarcity mindset regarding your time and energy, viewing every moment given to another person as a moment stolen from yourself. Finally, you struggle to find love because you are waiting for readiness. You are operating under the illusion that there will come a future moment where you are perfectly healed, financially secure, entirely confident, and devoid of fear. You believe that only then will you be ready for a relationship. This is a stalling tactic. It is a way to procrastinate vulnerability. The truth is that readiness is a myth. Intimacy is inherently messy, and it triggers our deepest insecurities regardless of how much self-work we have done. By demanding perfection from yourself before you enter the arena of love, you guarantee that you never have to enter it at all. You use your personal growth journey as a shield, telling yourself you are working on yourself, when in reality, you are hiding from the very experiences that would catalyze your growth. The resolution to this profound struggle does not lie in finding a better dating app, learning new communication scripts, or forcing yourself to go on more dates. It requires a fundamental rewiring of your association between intimacy and danger. You must begin to challenge the automatic interpretations of your nervous system. When you feel the urge to pull away, you must pause and label it. This is deactivation, not compatibility. When you feel bored by a secure partner, you must reframe it. This is safety, not lack of chemistry. You must be willing to tolerate the discomfort of vulnerability without acting on the impulse to flee. You must also dismantle the binary of self versus relationship. You need to learn that it is possible to be connected and autonomous simultaneously. You must practice setting boundaries that define your space without rejecting the other person. This means communicating your need for solitude as a personal requirement for regulation, rather than a reaction to their presence. It means allowing someone to see the parts of you that are not performing, the parts that are tired, quiet, and imperfect, and trusting that they can accept those parts. Ultimately, the struggle to find love is a struggle to accept that you are a human being with a biological imperative for connection, despite your intellectual attempts to override it. It is the realization that the hyper-independence that saved you in the past is now the cage that confines you in the present. To find the love you seek, you do not need to become a different person. You simply need to lower the defensive structures enough to let another person verify that you are lovable, not for what you do or how well you perform, but simply for who you are. The paradox is resolved when you stop protecting yourself from the very thing you want and accept the terrifying, beautiful risk of letting someone else matter.